Recording started and stream has started.
Hello, friends. This is the Statecraft series, our really dumb thingy where we talk about our schizo politics. How are you all doing today?
I want to fucking kill myself because I'm talking to y'all.
If you need a gun, I have plenty.
I have Claire to strangle me, don't worry.
Nice.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So the topic of the week of Monday is we're going to talk about the morality of taxation and redistribution. So the basis of this conversation comes from a discussion I was having on over Sunday coffee with a buddy of mine. It basically goes like this. We were talking about how he's noted, my buddy, how we get taxed here in Oregon because we both live in Oregon. We get taxed in Oregon, and then because we were talking about the big funding bill for Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan that was passed, he's like, well, they're given military aid, but the military aid is basically they get credit with our military industrial complex suppliers to buy weapons from them, on our dime and things like that. And he said he heard a lot of arguments of people saying, "Oh, well, that goes back into the economy and it helps the American economy overall. So foreign aid is actually a good thing." And he noted that aren't they all like on the East Coast? And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay, so if they're all on the East Coast, you're basically taking money from the West Coast and giving it to the East Coast." And I said, "Yeah, I mean that's basically what's happening." And he said, "That's basically like a redistribution scheme." And I said, "Yep." And I went on to say I don't like it because you're taking money from like the poorest people, literally people who like work at grocery stores and gas stations, people who aren't earning a lot of money, they're not skilled necessarily, and you're taking money out of their pocket and giving it to someone on the East Coast, a contractor, or I mean, it doesn't have to be on the East Coast, but most of the military contractors are on the East Coast, so the money goes to them and then it gets, sprinkled through the US because they have to have um they have to be all over the place, but it gets sprinkled over time over the U.S. through these private corporations, and maybe eventually, like a year from now, you'll feel the rippling effects of that Lockheed Martin employee going and buying a soda at your grocery store or whatever. But I think it's immoral to take money from other people and give it to other people just because you're trying to accomplish a goal. I don't agree with that at all.
Okay. Well, for me, it depends on the kind of taxation. So, like, I don't necessarily agree with income tax. I think that's immoral for me personally. But more choice-based taxes like sales tax, I think, are generally okay. But then I also have my own Georgia's land value tax, since I don't think land should be natural resources in general shouldn't be privately owned. And then
Yeah, I disagree with that, but not to turn it into a Georgia's discussion.
it always comes back.
But continue.
But then when it comes to redistribution, I think absolutely. Just about every thing that we do spend our tax money on is some sort of redistribution, as it does affect everyone else, and it invests back into the community in some way, whether it be directly or indirectly.
Okay, but the problem is that you're like it doesn't equally go back across the whole community equally. And I'm not saying that you support defense contractors getting income tax, like because you already said that income tax is immoral, but like just in the case of like the defense contractors, like they're like the employees who work at Lockheed Martin, yeah, they're building a missile that Israel is using to fight their war or whatever, or Ukraine or whatever, and that the person working at the factory who's building the missile, they might go out in town and buy stuff, but they're not going to every single business, and every single business paid taxes, and every single worker and every single business paid taxes. And so it's not being redistributed equally. It's being redistributed based on what that and what that defense contractor employee wants to spend it on.
Well, it's not necessarily about where they spend it, but rather since they do get this, like the military contractors get this investment to create these weapons. If a war were to break out with the U.S., then we have the military capability to fight off any invaders.
That's a different discussion.
But that's a type of redistribution. That's an indirect type of redistribution. It's indirect.
But okay, so yes, you're correct, but I'm talking about like my buddy. He was noting specifically for these funding bills for Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan, which I know you already support because you say we should help our allies out. But
Yeah.
like the problem is that like we're giving other people license to spend our money, and the argument that they're saying is that it will help the economy, but and because those defense contractors go and spend money, but it's not even, it's not equal. Everyone equally has to pay into it now, not an equal amount. And in fact, I don't, and we all agree that income taxes suck, and I don't like sales tax either because I think you'll agree with me, they affect the poorest among us. And so therefore I think it's immoral. And again, I'm not saying that you agree with that, but I don't think that taxes that come from the poorest people should be redistributed to the richest people in our society, because that's inevitably what happens when you give these resources to like defense contractors. And it doesn't have to be defense contractors. I'm just using them as an easy example because when I was in the Marines, we dealt with them all the time. So, but like it's not equal. It like everyone has to pay in, but not everyone gets everything back. Like when I was a mechanic, I definitely didn't feel that Lockheed Martin putting money back in my pocket.
Well, so um, for me, certain kinds of redistribution programs that end up affecting the poor the most, it gives them what they need. So that way, even if there's a sales tax, while it still is affecting them in some capacity, they still have everything they need to survive and to thrive. But when it comes to sales tax as
Like
well,
what?
well, I've discussed it before. The bottom tier housing kind of thing, food, water, uh, the basic necessities to life.
I'm confused. Like it should be provided because that's definitely not provided in America. So you're
It's
saying
not.
ought to be
I said it.
provided.
Yeah, it should be provided. Yes.
Okay.
Based off of
Okay.
what that's my type of redistribution program that I would like to see. Would not direct money, cash injection, but rather the actual resource itself being given and provided to everyone that needs it.
Get a little closer to your mic. You keep breaking up.
Fuck you.
There you go.
I might have to move it
Yeah, I
then
mean, okay, if okay.
later.
Well, go ahead and do that, and I'll talk. No, no, do it now. But I'm just kidding. But so, I mean, that's fair. I don't agree because I don't believe people should pay for things that they don't utilize. So, as I always say, like if there's a road and you don't use the road, I don't think you should have to pay for the road. And if you're not using someone's water, you shouldn't have to pay for it and things like that. You should only have to pay for the things that you use, which is why like to get back to your thing about like because you mentioned earlier that it's a good thing that we supply we give military contractors contracts because then we have like the ability to create munitions and stuff that the military uses, equipment and munitions to fight wars. And I do agree, but I don't agree with the way we're doing it right now, and I think we should do it a different way that is less redistributive, basically. Like I I don't know exactly how to do it right this second, but I'm just pointing out that there is a problem with how we do it.
Um, do we spend too much on military? Sure, I can agree with that. Um,
Yes.
we like. I think we should probably reduce some of our military bases. But by also creating more munitions, like instead of, because when it comes to Ukraine specifically, we're not sending direct cash over there. We're sending old munitions that were going to
Yes.
expire, or whatever. But by sending those
Yes.
old munitions, we are then having a deficit in our own stockpile. So then we create more jobs, more industry to then refill that stockpile, which is creating more jobs. So by supporting our allies in that case of sending munitions, we are then investing in ourselves as well.
Yes, but again, okay, so maybe where you live there's a bunch of defense contractors, but Oregon doesn't have that many defense contractors. There's like four and they all live in Portland. So like around where I live, there's nothing. Like there is one titanium. There was a titanium manufacturing plant that was in Lebanon, and they made like one part for the F-35. It was like some I think it was a set of bolts that went somewhere. And I mean, okay. So like the military industrial complex had a marginal effect on where I lived and things like that. And that's not just to say just for defense contracting, because in Oregon we have a lot of forestry. We have a fuckload of Forest Service and BLM, Bureau of Land Management guys. So I mean, there are other ways to get it, but it's I don't know. I just again I don't like the idea that people who aren't near the industry have to pay for it and things like that. But at the same time, when it comes to military, it's not easy because we all have to pay for defense. I just don't like the idea that like some people that like some people are getting rich off of, our need for defense and things like that. So I mean, I would actually, as anti-libertarian as this sounds, I would actually be okay with saying defense contractors can't earn a profit and they have to donate revenues and stuff.
I mean, you can do the complete opposite and say that every state needs its own like munitions of some kind, so that way it's each state is contributing.
Yeah.
Therefore,
yeah, I would be actually that's a better way. I'm glad that's I agree with that.
Yeah. So then every state has to contribute something in order for there to be munition, like for them to be paying, in a sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that more. That's big brain idea.
Big brain. Yeah.
Let's do it.
That's because I'm the thinker. I'm a thinker in this group. Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
The only intellectual among us.
The only intellectual among us.
I think the idea
Blood
of
hasn't read anything.
Sort of emphasizing. I think trying to enforce this equity, maybe in taxation. I recognize this is fallacious, but it's a little bit of a slippery slope. I think it has some pretty severe implications on the rest of government because ultimately anything supported by taxation isn't equally distributed amongst the nation, right? I mean, you can make the argument that maybe with something like defense, we all do equally benefit from the military, but I would argue an even more essential function of government beyond defense is the judicial system, right? Protecting people who can't necessarily protect themselves, settling disputes, things like that. And that judicial system requires some sort of revenue to sustain itself. You cannot support a court without taxation. And so if you're going to make this argument that any tax that is not equally impactful on all members of a nation is immoral, I think that sort of states that the judicial system is immoral. And I don't like that. The idea that somebody should have to pay for, a court, that somebody should have to directly pay for criminal proceedings if they're a victim of something, that somebody should have to, foot the bill if they want to see criminal charges pressed against somebody who wronged them. I think that's kind of a dangerous position. That's saying, to get to what Delta was saying earlier, that's putting an unnecessary burden on the poor, for being victims of crimes, right? So I think when you look at it from this perspective, I think that it's necessary to have some concession that although it's not ideal, we do have to be willing to, in order to function as a society, as a cohesive society, we do have to be willing to support people and support systems that maybe don't directly benefit us as much as it may our neighbor, but it does still hold some benefit. And by extension, there are systems that support us more than it does other people. And that's still okay too. It's sort of this compromise that you have to make with anything in societies, right? Nothing's going to be ideal. Nothing's going to be perfectly suited to every individual. There has to be some place where you sort of cut the idealization and say, okay, well, this isn't perfect, but I do recognize that it's necessary. And I think saying that exists with taxation, income taxation, sales tax, things like that, I think that's an important line to draw.
Okay, so I do agree with your assessment, and we kind of glossed over this, but I see the military as a very similar cost too, which is why I kind of glossed over it, because I'd say there's like 4, maybe 5 things. I can only think of 3 off the top of my head, and that's the military, police, and court systems are of things we have to kind of pay into, and it's like it's a revenue black hole. You're going to pay into it, and the idea is that revenue, while it doesn't turn a positive revenue or positive impact, the fact that we have a court system or a military or a police, we have police officers, fire departments, I guess, are a similar thing too. Although a lot of places make you pay a fire department fee, and if you don't pay it, they'll let your house burn down. But That's not everywhere. That's not universal. But like, there's like a couple things that I think I do agree that you have to pay into, and it's not fair and equal. But like you were saying, it's good that we do have a court system regardless, and the fact that you have, even if you never use the court system, the fact that it was there for you to use it if you need it is a good thing. So I do agree with that.
So then, would you
Yeah,
say
and
that?
I think the point.
Wait,
Oh, go
wait,
ahead.
let McGuire go.
Yeah, go
Let
ahead.
McGuire go.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that the reasoning that a tax might have an unequal impact on all members of society isn't necessarily justification to get rid of it by itself. I think that the substance of what the tax is doing should account for more than what the tax literally is. But in any case, Sonic, go ahead.
Yeah.
Just thinking, because I remember, Delta, you were saying before, maybe not in this conversation, but in other conversations, that a tax should only go for what it's like the road tax should only pay for the roads, but also that you're okay with tolls because you has like
It's a
you
type of
have to be
tax.
well, it's that you have to be using the thing in order to have to pay into it. But then you're saying when it comes to legal stuff that even if you're not using it, paying for it is good. Those seem like two different contradicting ideas.
Because unlike a road, which you can avoid using, but I mean, in theory, you can avoid using, a legal system you can't not use, basically. Like, if you like, I mean, we want a legal system. Like,
Yeah.
I would argue like the primary purpose of government. There's like two primary purposes. There's defense against foreign invaders and justice. Basically, like having some form of settling disputes between people in a peaceable way. And if you don't have that, there's no point to government. You'll just have chaos. So I
Completely right.
think like I think that is like those are the only two legitimate reasons for government. And so
There's
it's not it's on a different plane from a road.
well,
Like I don't think government, like we don't have governments to have roads.
well, there's a lot of people who would even say that we don't need a court system or a legal system, or that private systems will be better. You can look at the anarcho-capitalists because they say that kind of stuff. But when it comes to roads, we say the same thing about roads. Most Americans, or at least even most people in general, would say roads are a net benefit. Even if you don't use it, like if you don't use the legal system, them being there is a net benefit for everybody, just like a legal system.
I would argue that society would be able to function without the interstate highway system or paved roads. It would suck. Life wouldn't be as great as it is now, but it would suck. I don't think we could have a society if we got rid of the court system.
Well, yeah,
and
you
judicial
don't
and
think
police and
that,
things
but
like that. It would.
so you don't think that, but other people think that we don't need those systems and would rather private or none at all. So what you're saying about roads, people are saying it as well about the legal system.
So to steelman the anarcho-capitalist argument, and I'm not an anarcho-capitalist, but to steelman it because I know what they're saying.
Yeah.
They're saying that people, when they're mutually consenting, can come to better agreements than through coercive force, like having the government come in and force you to go to court and things like that. And I agree with them largely. I think most people. I think 99% of interactions that you have with people on the daily are anarchist in nature, as in there's no force that is enforcing anything. It is free will. It's freely consenting people. Now there's arguments about like, is culture enforced and things like that. Can you consent to culture? Can you freely remove yourself from culture? That's a different discussion.
Yeah.
But I believe that most people's interactions are anarchic in nature. So I do agree with the anarcho-capitalists. The problem is that there are certain disputes that require force in order to settle. For example, if there is a property dispute, and neither side is coming to a peaceful conclusion, they're both just arguing, it will eventually, if there isn't some outside force to come in and like settle a dispute, a third party, it will turn into the Hatfield and McCoys, basically. Like that's what we see throughout history everywhere. So I don't agree with the anarcho-capitalists that you can have a truly consenting system all the way.
Sure, but it still doesn't get to the point I'm making in a sense that what you're saying about roads, like it would suck that if we don't have them, but they're not like because you're saying they're not necessary. But a legal system is people say the same thing about legal systems that they're not necessary.
Well,
So
hold on. I'm not saying they're not necessary. I'm saying so if we didn't have roads, if we didn't
yeah,
have the internet, if we didn't have government funded roads, people would find a way to make their own road basically. I don't know how, but they would. If we didn't have a judicial system, yeah, people would figure out a way, but it would be probably way more violent, and eventually they would eventually come to the same conclusion that the founding fathers had, which is we should keep this English common law system and, kind of tweak it a little bit but keep it how it is. Like we would be reinventing the wheel, whereas like with roads, people would I think people would figure it out, and it wouldn't be bloodshed and carnage.
well, it depends because I even think if you're like trying to build roads, it would still probably have some bloodshed and carnage when it comes to it because there'll be disputes over like what type of roads certain communities want to use or conflicts on what piece of
Maybe.
land should be a road versus a house or whatever. So no matter what, there will always be conflict
Maybe.
and even bloodshed.
I
Maybe.
don't
Oh, go ahead, McGuire.
I don't want to like suppose Delta's position or anything, but I think to try and add on to what Delta's trying to say here, and to make it clear, I think that roads are a very necessary function of government. Delta knows. I don't know about Sonic, but it's something I've argued very heavily in the past. But roads are not necessarily intrinsically necessary to cohesive society. They
Yeah.
definitely benefit. They're definitely important aspects of our culture and society today. But if you remove roads, it doesn't necessarily have a direct impact on people's freedom, right? People's ability to
Yes.
exist, people's right to be a person. Versus if you remove courts, if you remove this sort of barrier between interference in other people's lives, you do open the door to individuals forcing their will onto others without challenge. You do open the door to dangerous disputes. You do open the door to criminals going unpunished and people getting taken advantage of, assaulted, killed, etc., etc., etc. Because these are necessary things that a court stands in the way of. So it does exist on a completely different plane. I definitely agree with Delta on this. Roads are of material benefit, but in terms of rights and your ability to live, to pursue happiness, to be an individual, the court is very important to that. And to go a little further with this, Sonic, as you were saying, with roads and privatization of roads, there could be disputes, there could be there could be violence, there could be issues with creating roads and trying to coordinate that. But I think this gets to the gist of what Delta's saying and what I'm trying to say here. If you have a court system in place, that can act as an arbitrator for that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So even with your example on those roads, the problems that you're suggesting exist without government roads are directly solved by a court system, which really speaks to the central importance of courts in a judicial system.
Yes. I just want to say one thing real quick to add on to what you're saying, McGuire. People aren't bad at solving problems. In fact, people are really good at solving problems. The problem with people is that they're really shit at governing themselves. And when they try to govern themselves, they either can't or they murder everybody. And this is the problem with government. So if we do our best to try to remove people's ability to govern themselves from each other, like making them a republic and not a democracy, but that's a different discussion. But I mean, like, if we remove that from them, people can solve this, and we have a third party arbitrate between two disputing parties. It gets way less violent, and it's way easier to solve problems.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
and also, like, just one last thing, comparing the court system to roads is like comparing an orange to like the solar system. It's just completely different plane of comparison.
Okay. Yeah, I see where you're
So
going, where you're coming from with that. Yeah, I personally though I do feel like just like a legal system, roads are necessary and should be paid for, regardless if you're using them or not. Just like a legal system.
listen, if a community, if a town wants to get together and they say, let us all pool our money together and pave all the roads in the town together equally. Even Mr. Johnson's house, and he lives on a winding road on the side of the mountain, and he's the only one that drives up and down it. And everyone in the town agrees, great, that's fine, I'm cool with it. The problem is that we have, like, it's not just with the roads, it is with so much with taxation, where there are so many programs and things where it's like you pay. Like, I don't agree with Social Security at all. I don't want to pay into it, but if I don't pay into Social Security, the IRS will be knocking on my door and auditing me, and possibly taking stuff out of my house, to sell it, to pay for my taxes and things like that. And if I resist, they could arrest me, and if I resist violently, they might kill me. So, like,
Wait, sure.
I think there's too much. I think there's too much.
So I think there's some things that we do with taxation that I don't like, and there's some things with taxation I wish we did do instead.
Wait. Just to cut you off real quick.
Oh.
I'm not saying you agree with income taxes. I just want to be really clear.
Well, yeah, I also don't agree with Social Security. I think my system could be a better replacement for Social Security, and a better replacement for all of our current social programs, even.
Yeah, but that's a different discussion.
Well, it goes down to our ideas of taxation and redistribution, because my idea is a redistribution policy of some kind. It's a direct redistribution policy instead of indirect, like the military.
Okay, so basically what you're getting at is that we broadly agree that some amount of redistribution is okay, because like what McGuire said about the courts and the military is something we all agree with. But you and I would say, like, I would be on one extreme end where I'm like, it should be the bare minimum what we need. So like the military, not one soldier more. And like you were saying, like maybe my ideal would be all the states, per capita contribute some military stuff, and we have courts and stuff. But then you're on the opposite extreme end, or maybe not extreme, but like you're more okay with redistribution and things like that. Maybe you can opt out of some things, but like
when it
like Social Security.
Yeah, well, I don't think we should have Social Security at all. I just think that entire policy is a Ponzi scheme and should be removed altogether.
Yes.
Which I'm sure we all agree with, that Social Security is fucking stupid. But I'm more so, I wouldn't say the extreme end. It's just, I probably push mine a little further than you, because you are the bare minimum of what we need to survive, whereas I say roughly the same thing. It's just I include a little bit more to that bare minimum, being the bare minimum for each individual as well, for their basic necessities.
My bare minimum is I need at least 14 different motorcycles. That's my bare minimum to survive.
And for me, I need all the hot Asians.
I will kill myself if I don't have 14 motorcycles.
Decreed. It has been decreed. Delta Sword has to get 14 motorcycles from the junkyard.
Well, he doesn't have to do anything. He's very clearly laid out that there's two options here, which I assume both are equally okay. So
it's either the motorcycles or death.
But no, I think we all agree in a sense that taxation redistribution should be the bare minimum. We just disagree on what that bare minimum is.
Yeah. So going into this discussion, and to kind of back it up a little bit, my problem is that taxes were being used to benefit private entities, specifically private corporations. And it's funny because, we take all these political tests, and I'm always counted as like a libertarian, and like the meme of libertarian is that they love corporations and things like that. But I fucking hate corporations. I think corporations are like almost worse than the government in a lot of ways. Like, so I don't like that, and that's my main gripe, and that was like kind of the basis of this topic, is I don't like that taxes are going to private businesses and things like that. Like, maybe I would be more okay with your ideals of redistribution and giving like people basic, amounts of food, water, and housing and things like that. But it would have to be in a way where it doesn't go to a private business at all. I don't think private businesses should have anything to do with our taxes at all.
So like you'd be okay under my system, you'd be only okay with it if like that food was coming from like a government source of some kind. Like the government has like a farm, and then through that farm they provide everyone with the necessary food and water, and then government housing or whatever.
You know what we need to bring back?
What?
We need to bring back the poorhouse. Do you know what the poorhouse is?
I've heard about it.
Was?
I've heard about it.
The poorhouse was a plot of county land where if you were in debt and you were evicted and you were homeless, you would go live on this plot of land, and you would it was basically like a barracks room, and you'd go work the poor farm and you would live off the poor farm. It fucking sucked.
See, I've been told about that, and
we need to bring that back.
I don't know. We shouldn't. I don't like that.
But it's basic food, water, and housing.
You shouldn't. I don't think you should necessarily have to work to receive benefits, like those kind of benefits. It's just I think it should be universally applied to everybody, regardless if they want to work or if they're not able to or if they are working. If it should be the universal thing.
Hold on. If you had polio and you were in an iron lung, they were like, get out and start weeding. Like, that's not how that works.
Oh, you fucking got your legs blown off in Nam? I don't care. Go fucking pick cotton.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not how it was. Like it was like the people who went on the poor farm. Now it was mostly like mentally incapable people and also lots of convicts. So like it was basically like a prison without walls. So like people were like fighting and stealing from each other all the time. So like I'm just using it mostly as a joke example, but like it's kind of to illustrate that like we've had systems where, you know, everything you've said has been described before, and
I don't think that was effective though. And it's not, the spirit is the same, but the execution is entirely different from what I would want to see out of that.
Well, okay, so how about this? What if a county wants a poor farm, but it's not mean and evil, like I was saying? Like the county provides them the resources to thrive, and with the idea that like you go to the poor farm and you build some skills, maybe not go literally farm, like not literally farm, but like it's like a place where you go and there's like maybe there's like a college professor who volunteers and or like, you know, a tradesman who goes and volunteers and, you know, teaches them how to weld or do stuff, you know?
Yeah, so almost like
build skills.
Like a trade college, but government funded in a way.
But you also live there too. Maybe you don't live in a barracks, like you get your own room that locks and stuff.
For me, I think I've discussed this pretty in depth before. For me, housing would probably be like some sort of studio or one bedroom apartment that fits into the local ecosystem, the structures, and then basic food being like canned food or whatever, maybe on like every block or something like that, or within a good radius there is like a canned food drive or something like that that's run by the state, and then water is accessible there as well as in the home, so everyone has access to these. And then you could have government farms of some kind, where people can work if they want to, but they're not forced to work for these amenities.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you're missing what I'm saying though, is that like we and I'm not saying we should implement this. I'm saying if a community wants this, they can have it. But I'm just saying like I think you agree with kind of what I'm saying a little bit, but you're just going more in depth into how it actually functions.
Yeah. This probably could get further in depth, but that's up to the economist to to go into further.
Oh God! If I've learned, I have a degree in economics, and if I've learned anything about there's two types of economists. There's economists who will tell you they don't know anything, and then they're fucking idiots. So
true.
If there's anyone who, if you talk to an economist and the first thing they say is, "Listen, I don't know anything," they're a fucking idiot, and don't listen to them.
It sounds like what is it? The quantum mechanics people. Like if someone says they know quantum mechanics, they don't know shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Ask a quantum physicist what the particle's spin and position is, and if they give you an answer, they're bad.
Yeah, because you can't measure that shit. Like if you can't know you can't know.
You can measure one, but not the other.
Yeah, that's like you can't get the position and the measurement at the same time. Because as soon as you measure it, then you lose where it is entirely because of how particles interact with each other.
Well, you affect it.
You change it. Yeah. Because you need lights, and since light is a It's kind of everything. It's
It's a particle.
It's a particle and a
wave.
wave at the same time. Yeah. Since you need light to measure things and to see things, by looking at it with light, you in turn affect it and move it somewhere else. So
Do you know why they call it light?
why?
Because it's so light, weighs nothing.
You're fucking stupid.
Still has momentum. Come on.
We could listen. There's a part of me, and if we lived in another world where the government wasn't a fascist tyranny that was trying to like steal all of our rights, I would be like the biggest nerd on planet Earth. Because like because whenever I'm not using my brain power to think about like this shit, like I'm either and I'm not working on my motorcycles and stuff. I'm either researching like astronomy or like quantum physics and things like that, so I could like hyper nerd out on it and things like that. Like this podcast would go from like I don't know, it would be way different if I had my way.
I completely support that change in direction. I have a bookshelf full of quantum chemistry textbooks that
But
Quantum
need to be dusted
chemistry.
off.
How does that work?
chemistry on the
It's the
quantum
chemistry
level.
or I guess right, exactly, bonding.
Yeah.
Is that chemistry or is that just quantum physics at but like more
Well,
The
specific?
technical field is physical chemistry, but yeah, it's the overlap between physics and chemistry.
Okay, I see. So it's like how the actual bonds between the atoms form molecules and things like that in compounds.
hey Delta,
Right.
you're the
So like
biggest
specifically covalent bonding.
Delta. You're the
Okay.
biggest nerd here. Give me the answer to gravity and quantum mechanics. What's the answer?
Well, gravity doesn't really have much to do with quantum mechanics because it's gravity isn't really anything. It's just how space-time is curved. So
Yeah.
like there is no graviton or anything,
But
and that's why anti-gravity can't exist.
There's a contradiction though between Newton and these both work perfectly on paper and in reality, but they seem to have a contradiction to each other of the idea of gravity in terms of Newton, or sorry, not Newton, Einstein versus gravity within the quantum realm. They've been trying to.
Well,
There's a contradiction in how it's supposed to work, but they both work.
well, I mean, it's because here's the thing. Okay, here's the thing, boys and girls. Science is not prescriptive, it's descriptive.
Yeah.
It describes what we observe about the world, and this is why it's a good thing if scientific theories are proven wrong, because it means that our previous observations were not in line with what reality was and things like that.
Yeah.
So like Newton was observing the apple fall and he came up with his idea of gravity basically because he assumed that gravity had something to do with the mass, and he assumed that from his observations basically, and he deduced that there was something in the mass that caused gravity, and it's where the idea of like the graviton came from, which is like for the longest time it was believed to be what the gravity particle was. They thought gravity was a particle, and then Einstein comes along and he says actually it's all just space-time curving, and so while it looks like from the outside that that the apple has this thing that causes gravity, but that's not really what's happening. It's just space is being folded and molded because of how mass interacts with space-time, and we don't know why that happens.
Yeah.
We assume it has something to do with the Higgs particle,
The Higgs boson.
but we still don't know.
Yeah, and actually,
Well, in the Higgs field.
yeah,
So.
but people who have been studying quantum, the quantum stuff, have gone back to possibly looking for a graviton, to explain gravity on the quantum level.
Okay, I mean maybe. They thought the Higgs boson was the thing that gave. The long story short is they assumed that the Higgs boson, which Higgs bosons don't really exist anymore. They exist for fractions of a second, but they decay into the Higgs field basically, and they assumed that the Higgs boson and the Higgs field is what causes particles to have mass, and why that, and it's like the missing link between what causes particles to have mass and that effect on space-time. But like I said, they can't They don't know, and maybe there is a particle called the graviton, and we just can't measure it. And I've heard that, and I know what you're talking about because they're trying to fire up the LHC, and they're trying to also use the same thing that was measuring gravity waves and things like that. I forget what it was called, but they're trying to use that to figure out if they can measure like a graviton and things like that to determine that, because they think that the graviton would be like it would be an extra dimensional thing. It'd be like in the fifth or sixth
Yeah.
dimension, but if you believe in M theory, but I believe M theory is bullshit. But that's a different discussion.
Yeah, I think
Anything string theory is just bullshit in general.
Yeah.
So
I also think one of the problems is that even if this thing exists, we don't know like what kind of instruments we'll need to even look for this thing if it does exist. So we could have the necessary materials now to find it, or we don't have it at all, or we'll never be able to have the necessary technology to find it if it does exist.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the one thing with science is that there is always more uncertainty than certainty. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
How'd y'all enjoy the eclipse?
I was at school and it was also cloudy, and I'm in Oregon, so
Ooh,
like not
rough.
only was it cloudy, but even if it wasn't cloudy, we would have like made
Partial.
like we would have seen the moon, maybe like it would have like touched the sun
You would have a
basically.
partial, yeah. It was way too cloudy here, so I couldn't. And also I didn't want to see it without my fiance, so I didn't bother.
I think I forget in 2017 or 2018 there was a annular eclipse that was, which annular just means that the moon is in its orbit, it's at a greater distance from the earth, and so it's not a totality event
Yeah.
like this one was. And that one was right over Oregon, and that one was pretty cool because even though it didn't totally cover the sun, even though it did block the sun,
Mhm.
the moon did, the full body of the moon did come into contact with the sun. It still got really dark and it got really cold. So I remember that. That was cool.
Yeah.
I looked at it. I I
Yeah.
have a welding helmet and I watched it through
How
my welding helmet. So
about you, McGuire? Did you see it?
I stepped outside. It was slightly gray.
It was slightly
But that's
gray.
about it.
Did y'all hear about
I'm not an astronomer, so
Did y'all hear about some
I love
fucking
astronomy.
wild theories from like TikTok and YouTube about the eclipse? Have y'all seen
Oh,
those?
people go crazy.
Yeah.
People go crazy.
There was this
Anything to do with the sky, people go fucking crazy.
someone on TikTok. I saw this on a YouTube video, but someone on TikTok was saying that it was like a hologram. That the eclipse was just a hologram.
oh, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
well, I mean, there are flat earthers who believe that the moon is, it's a psyop, and there are people who believe that like NASA launches the moon into orbit, or like not into orbit, but on a suborbital trajectory, and it crashes into the ice wall. Then they have to go
Jesus.
and fish it out and relaunch it the next day and things.
Don't
There's some fucking.
don't
I can't tell if they're real or not.
don't ask a flat earther the model for a model because none of them work.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, you can literally measure the curvature of the Earth with like you and a buddy.
Yeah,
Like
literally just sticks.
you just need, yeah, with sticks. Like it's like I've done it before. It's really fucking cool. It's super easy to do.
Yeah, we've known the Earth has
So
curvature for thousands of years. I don't know how, and then NASA has
yeah.
been only around for like 100. I don't know how anyone can say like, oh, it's NASA and the government when they haven't even been around that long.
Well, the the conspiracy is built on other ones, like ancient aliens are, the government discovered ancient technology
Yeah,
long time ago, all sorts of stuff. No, but it's funny because the flat earth thing, it just goes to show that like what I was saying about science earlier, it's not prescriptive, it's descriptive. Um, Science, like I said, science only describes what we can observe. And so like when the best of our observations, before we figured out how to, that we could use two sticks at two different latitudes to measure the curvature of the earth, people just assumed the earth was flat because you look around and it's
it looks
fucking
flat.
flat.
It looks like
Maybe
it.
if you get
Yeah,
on a mountain, if you get, yeah, and you have to go really far before, I mean, you have to go really far into space. Like people who say, "Oh, you can see the curvature of the Earth from an airplane," they're lying. Like that's not true at all. They're seeing, or they're not lying, but they're mistaken. They're seeing they're seeing mirages and distortions and things like that. It's like, you know how on a hot day when you're walking down the road and it'll like reflect in a weird way and you'll see like that shimmery thing, or you'll see like the road reflecting above the road
Yeah.
basically. It has to do with like air pressure and current and heat and how light refracts through that and things like
Yeah.
that. And it's the same thing when people get in airplanes and go up really high. They don't see the curvature of the Earth. They see the light refracting through different air temperatures and pressures and things like that.
Yeah, and then when it comes to
But I
light as
mean,
well, even when you're high up, like, or even like on ground level, people like will zoom in with the camera and be like, "Oh, look, I'm not supposed to be able to see that," but that's the way the light reflects within the atmosphere. It's just like here's the Earth, and then like the light's coming in, and then it just kind of curves around, so you can see
yeah,
things like that you're not necessarily supposed to see.
yeah. Well, and so the point of what I was saying though is that like our scientific observations are only as good as what we can do at the time. And so the reason why people believe in the flat Earth is because they haven't figured out another way to do it. And I'm willing to bet if they did the measurement themselves, they would probably be convinced. You know,
No, they won't.
and
Not a lot of them, no.
maybe. Oh, I mean, I mean, there is the possibility that like two flat earthers literally try the experiment and then it turns out they were wrong because the Earth isn't flat, and then the guy comes back and one guy comes back and he says I'm convinced, and the other guy says, well, you're a Fed or you were paid off or whatever. Like, so I mean that's true, but I think people who are trying in good faith to figure out the truth, they would eventually see reason and truth, but
Like,
their
there's
observations are only as good as what they have.
there was a documentary with flat earthers, and one of them they did a test, like they did across the pond. The idea was that they were supposed to hold it at like chest height, and they could see it across the pond because there's supposed to be no curvature. And like, oh, I don't see it. Raise it above your head. Raise it above his head, and you could see it because of how everything was curving. And then they're like, oh, that doesn't prove that the Earth is round. We were just wrong about our
Yeah.
measurements or some shit like that.
Well, that's why I said a good faith, like, because the other thing is a lot of people who believe in like the flat Earth and things like that. They're not doing it in good faith. They have bigger. It's like our mutual friend on that server about the moon landing and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, you can say like, well, how come there are refractors on the moon? He'll just be like, he'll come up with some other explanation.
Oh, satellites went up there and placed them.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, that they literally can't do that, not with modern technology. Like, we can barely. It's super expensive, and we barely have enough to like get rocks.
We're
like,
having trouble.
we're
having trouble landing probes on the moon again, and we did it in the 60s.
And then he's like, oh, what about the heat shielding? Like, they have to test this new technology. Like, yes, it's like a computer. You test the new computer to see if it works. Yes, we test things all the time, even things that have been solved. Why don't you use instead of building your computer? Why don't you use one from like the 60s? Because it's obsolete. You don't fucking use that shit anymore.
One problem with computers in space is that because there's so many cosmic ray particles, and I don't know if you know anything about cosmic ray particles, but they're particles that go like almost the speed of light, and they're like protons and neutrons and electrons. They're flying at the speed of light, and if they hit a computer, they can cause air. They won't damage it necessarily. They could, but what could happen is they might flip a bit, and it might cause an error and things like that.
I've heard about that.
And
yeah.
so it's a big problem. Yeah, it's a big problem, and one of the reasons why like NASA will send like computers that are like 40 or 50-year old computer technology into space is because they've designed it to be good in space, and the latest and greatest, Intel or Nvidia chip or whatever, it hasn't gone through that process to figure out how to, shield it from this stuff that can cause, calculation errors. And if you cause a calculation error at the wrong time, you can fire retro rockets at the wrong time, all sorts of problems. So like
the interesting thing too with go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add on the struggling to get back into space thing. But a lot of people don't realize from an aerospace engineering perspective is the change in safety standards. I mean, even the space shuttle, 40 years ago would not be created today. The sheer lack of testing and the abysmal safety margins on that would not stand today. The airline industry is a great example, right? You can look at lawyers, right? if you find a random 80-year lawyer, I guarantee you, 5 times out of 10, they're going to have experience in airline litigation because plane crashes were so frequent, 40, 50 years ago. But aerospace has developed and engineering tolerances have gotten extremely tight to the point where you can count on one hand the number of major plane crashes that have happened in the last decade, right?
Yeah.
Just don't look at
And
Boeing.
that tracks to space flight too.
Just don't
Yeah.
just don't look at Boeing
But
right
that,
now.
that all tracks to space flight too. So you do have to consider that when everybody's like, "Oh, we've lost this technology." Part of it is the lack of production capability and the lack of current experience with it. But the other major aspect is that if you were to part for part build a Saturn V today, it would not legally be able to fly. It's just not
Yeah.
considered safe by modern standards. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's tangential to computers.
And
So I'll
that's
let you guys get back to the technical.
and
Well, no. I listen. No, we can pull this because I love talking about the space shuttle, and we can pull it back into our discussion about government because the space shuttle is the fucking reason we don't have a Mars colony right now.
Yeah.
I fucking hate the space shuttle. It is the worst thing ever, and I couldn't agree more with you, McGuire. And furthermore, even the people who designed the space shuttle at the time knew it was fucking unsafe, and the reason it was fucking unsafe is because the goddamn Department of Defense got in. They're like, we need the space shuttle for this potential polar mission that they never ever flew once. There are 14 dead astronauts. There are 14 dead people because the Department of Defense wanted to maybe fly a mission. Fuck the government. Fuck the government. Fuck them.
Nope, and that's a major issue with all of American space technology. Obviously, it comes down to at the end of the day, defense applications first, right? I mean, everything has to fly if the National Reconnaissance Office says it can fly. That's the end all be all. Then nothing happens.
Literally, one of the major reasons that we landed on the moon is because the military unironically wanted to build a moon base. They could build a moon telescope to spy on the Soviet Union. That was literally one of the things that they wanted to do, and it was one of the reasons why the Department of Defense allowed funding to get NASA to get the funding and the research to build the Apollo.
And then probably even
Exactly.
and there was also ideas of like space lasers and fucking like the rods from God.
Yeah, like the Gemini program, they had this whole it was called the MOL, the Manned Orbital Laboratory, and that was specifically a Space Force thing they want to do and things like that. And like the MOL was going to be this thing where they like had a laboratory in space, but it also was going to have a giant fucking telescope that looked at the Soviet Union, and they were going to take pictures. And I'm sure McGuire's familiar with this, but there were old spy satellites in the 60s and through the mid 80s where they would literally eject a film canister and it would deorbit and they would pick it up in flight, and they were going to do that with the MOL too. They were going to have these astronauts in space take pictures and then eject a fucking film canister.
You just tore open some old wounds for me. I forgot that Gemini is not pronounced Gemini. That's
It's Gemini.
Yeah, fuck you.
Whatever. Okay. Fuck my dick.
That's the Sonic, if you're unaware, that's the correct NASA pronunciation for the Gemini mission.
Pronunciation. He can't even pronounce pronunciation correctly. He's gonna get on my dick about Gemini.
Okay, I'm not criticizing. I'm criticizing NASA. Why would you fucking make it Gemini?
It's Gemini.
Gemini.
It's Gemini.
Nobody pronounce it. Yeah. But officially it's Gemini, which is just it makes it. I can feel like the vomit going up the back.
Anyways, so the government sucks at fucking designing spaceflight, and I'm the opposite on. To get back to the redistribution, spaceflight should be a private thing. Although if they put a billboard in space, I think the government should be obligated to shoot it down.
It's just like there's like a moon advertisement.
Yeah, in the 80s, Coke wanted to put they want to put this it was a billboard in space they called it, but it was basically going to be like a giant paper thing with a Coke ad printed on it, and they were going to send it into space and orbit it and things like that, and they were going to pay NASA a fuckload of money to do it. The only reason why I didn't go is because people were like, oh, it's just space trash and we don't want to do that.
So that
which I'm glad,
that
because
almost
if they did
went
that,
through.
I would
That almost went through. We've just been seeing a fucking giant Coke ad every fucking morning.
I would go to school if that happened. I would have gone to college to learn the astrophysics and the rocket
To shoot that
engineering
shit
to
down.
build an ASAT to shoot it down.
But think, if Coke did that, then a bunch of other agencies would have come in and had their advertisements in space as well. So it wouldn't just been Coke. It would have been like Pepsi. It would have been like fucking everything.
Yes, I would have shot them all down.
You would shut them all down all at the same time.
Yes. I would literally be like Ted Kaczynski, but for space. I would be mailing them pipe bombs into orbit.
In orbit. I'm really glad that the governments of the world were like, yeah, no, space belongs to everybody. You can't do that kind of shit. Although they're trying to change that now with certain accords, so that way we could start doing space mining.
Well, okay, so this is a fun discussion. So if let's say like space travel becomes kind of more like the Expanse, where getting into space isn't super expensive and more people can do it, I think it has to be. I think people, regardless of what the laws are, I think people will start mining asteroids and things like that, and that's just an inevitability because the government won't be able to police everyone and stop everyone from mining asteroids. So I think that will happen eventually.
I actually like the idea of space mining.
I'm okay.
Space mining is awesome.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm okay with mining asteroids and things like that. I don't want the night sky to be a big fucking billboard.
Yeah,
that's what I care about.
Or like giant Coke ad on the moon, just like all in lights, just illuminating the world.
Yeah, I would fucking.
You'd nuke the moon.
Yeah, no, space mining is gonna happen basically.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic thing, but I still think, with my Georgist mind or whatever, that just like land on Earth, the space should belong to everybody in a sense.
So here's another problem. What happens? Let's say space is I forget exactly what they say, but it's like it's everyone has a right to space basically. Like it's the common heritage. I think it's the common heritage of mankind. Okay, so you and I go to the moon.
Yeah.
And you and I, at the same time, we see the same landing spot, and we both want to land at the same spot and basically live at this landing spot.
Mm-hmm.
How do we settle that dispute? How does that work?
In a sense, it's whoever's there first, right? That's usually how it goes.
What if you still disagree?
Then we can, I guess, fight it in space court. And then, but they'll just end up going with
no space court though.
Not yet. There will be.
By
the time me and you are able to get to the moon with our fucking abysmal incomes, there would be a space court of some kind.
Well, and that's the thing is that while the space heritage is the common heritage of all mankind thing, that's like a good sentiment. I don't think in the long term it's feasible. There is going to be privately owned plots on the moon and things like that, and that's just how it's going to be.
Well, in a sense, I
think allocation.
We still have this kind of problem on Earth too, with places that do recognize land as everybody's in some capacity. It's usually just first come, first serve. As long as you can pay for that land in some way, then it is yours to use.
Go ahead, Maguire.
So this does become, a major issue, like Sonic was saying. Especially water rights is a big one, right? In hydrology, there's a lot of concern about groundwater. This first come first serve thing is something that in water law is typically called English rule, right? That if you buy it, it's yours. But there is a major concern with that, especially in terms of what are called cones of depression, right? So if you start pumping water out of the ground, it draws in water from everywhere, right? You drain an entire aquifer, irregardless of whether or not that water that you're pumping out ultimately comes from under your ground. So it is important to draw a line and recognize that, even if we do institute private property, there has to be some oversight to make sure that beneficial allocation is happening, right? You don't just have a factory pumping out water from an aquifer for the sake of pumping out water from an aquifer, but it's also important to pay mind to the fact that mining these resources has impact on resources of other people outside of the scope of your land. And so this starts to enter into what water law would term American rule, which, starts to allocate resources, mineral resources, water resources, etc., based on beneficial use and permits and so forth. I think that does have to be expanded to space. I don't think public land is really a sustainable thing. That's never going to happen, right? People act in self-interest, and you'll ultimately have people, trying to make use of these resources and seize them. So I think it's best to get ahead of the, horse on this one and say, okay, well, we'll have privatization, but we should have a structure in place to ensure responsible privatization, right?
Well, you can have a mix
I
of
do
both.
agree.
You can have a mix of both in some in capacity, sure.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So I do agree that like your example with water is great and perfect, but one problem is that so I don't like how the government manages it, and I think we need to do a better job at managing it,
Absolutely.
because one problem is that, like, let's say you're a small farmer and you want to get water rights. It's really expensive for you to go to court and or to go to the Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management or whoever is managing the land and managing the aquifer or whatever. Whereas if you're a giant corporation, like a giant factory farm, you'll pay one of your 5 lawyers on retainer to go, down on Tuesday and do that and bang it out. So I think there needs to be a system. The system needs to be a lot easier for common people to use and things like that. And I overall, the American court and legal system and how the bureaucratic state functions needs to be streamlined a lot, because it really is the realm of specialists. And like, if you want to do anything legal, you have to hire a lawyer, because it's too complicated and things like that. And it shouldn't be that way. And not even just like legal. Like, if you, like I was saying, like if you want to go talk to like the Bureau of Land Management, you need to hire a lawyer or whatever. And it shouldn't be that way. The only reason why you should hire a lawyer is because you personally don't have the time to do it, but it's not because you can't do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you see these bureaucracies, they are very faceless and very hard to communicate with. And they are very inequitable, right? Even in cases when they do, favor the common man, it still comes at a pretty detrimental cost to society. I guess keeping with the water theme, in the Midwest, right? The EPA, the Clean Water Act, I should be specific here, specifically stipulates that agriculture is not regulated by the Clean Water Act, right? So you have all these industries that are forced to adhere to these anti-pollution policies, and I think it is for a net benefit to society. But agriculture farmers are not, and so right now in the Midwest, there's a massive, very very problematic epidemic of nitrogen runoff from unmanaged manure, excessive use of fertilizer,
It's all
etc.
going to Mississippi, right?
Yeah, well, so that is a big part of it. Yeah, there's a massive. You can look at an overhead image of the mouth of the Mississippi. There's massive algal blooms, from all of this growth, and that's a major public health concern, right? Algal blooms release harmful toxins, and those are aerosolized by waves, and those aerosols can travel several kilometers inland and cause severe health issues. But the nitrogen exposure too is harmful in its own right. There's a connection to things like blue baby syndrome, right? Cyanosis in children, due to exposure to these fertilizers. And this all ultimately comes down to the fact that you have literally states worth of agriculture that is dumping literal cow shit into drinking water, and nobody's doing anything about it. And so I think that the implementation that the government does on everything is very imperfect, and there's cause for a tremendous amount of, I guess, what would the word be? Reform. I would say it's very bang bang, right? Either the government is too hardcore and it's an inaccessible system, or the government is just flat out hands off, like agriculture, and you get this issue where infants without their consent while they're in the womb are getting debilitating lung conditions, neurological conditions, etc., because of the actions of farmers that they have no control or consent over. And so it's a massive issue, and I think that there needs to be more conversations about sort of where the failures of the government's responsibilities are in these matters.
You know who has a lot of money and money to pay lawyers and lobbyists to go to government? Farmers. You know
Yeah,
who has no money to go lobby at the government and
Us,
lawyers?
us,
Babies. That's well, no,
yeah.
babies and well,
babies.
and us. But I mean, that's literally the reason why. It's like the like one problem is that the government is just going to listen to people like. Not, like I love to say politicians are evil scumbags and stuff, and they are. But like even a good faith, even like a good faith interpretation of like someone, Mr. Deeds goes to Washington, um, and he's honestly trying to do his best and stuff. They only can hear so many people every day, and if there are people whose job is literally to go talk to congressmen and senators, like who do you think that our politicians are going to listen to? Those people. And so like I think a key reform there would be I don't know how to do it, but like that would be a key, like a starting point at the very least, like eliminate that somehow.
More lobbyists.
The capture of stuff like that, or I don't know, but like that is one avenue and things like that. I'm not saying it's the only
Mhm.
one, but
And I think, to keep with this podcast's consistent theme of smaller government, a big, or I guess more local government, a big solution to this is to obviously, try to put local government in,
yes,
more charge of their water resources,
yes,
and things in general. So then these massive legislative issues can be handled on a smaller scale, right?
exactly,
An environmental engineer in a small town is vastly more equipped to analyze the needs of that town, analyze the environmental concerns, what agriculture needs, what the babies need, and come up with a solution than a team of environmental engineers at the EPA who are overseeing the entire United States. Now, I do recognize that there's a need for some sort of centralized authority. In this case, there is a need for the EPA because obviously, like with the Mississippi, this affects multiple states, and now you're entering into the territory of settling disputes between states, and then this affects other countries, right? This is obviously an international issue. If you have runoff going into the Gulf of Mexico, so there does have to be some federal involvement at some point, I'd argue, but um, we're very reliant on the federal government. This shouldn't
yeah.
be an exclusively federal issue. There's no reason why a local government should only be concerned about wastewater that they're producing through a wastewater treatment plant. A local government should be concerned about water quality in general, not just what they're directly creating. It should be a concern about what their constituents are creating. It should be something that everybody takes an active role in because obviously this affects everybody.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe we.
Well, and it's
Uh,
go ahead.
I was gonna say maybe we could have a system where the EPA does exist, and then you end up with like regional councils that like they kind of deal with their own regions and report back to the federal, and then you end up like going smaller and smaller, just like how a corporation runs, where you have the CEO and then you have his underlings and they have theirs, and it's so on and so forth, like a pyramid.
Well, I mean, the point of our system is we were a federal, and the root of that is the root word of that is federated. So the idea is that regions are independent of each other, and our government, like specifically the Supreme Court, one of the primary like 5 functions of the Supreme Court was to settle disputes between the states. And so kind of the idea of the Supreme Court is that like let's say is Kentucky on the Mississippi drainage
No,
basin?
no, I
Basin.
don't think it is. No.
I
Okay,
think
well, whatever state is like, if Louisiana is getting ass fucked because one of the states on the drainage basin is just throwing fertilizer and cow shit into the river left, right, and center,
Yeah.
like Miss or Louisiana, sorry, well, and Mississippi, but
Yeah.
Louisiana would be able to go to and Mississippi would be able to go to um would be able to take that state to court, and like they would be able to resolve, figure out some resolution and things like that. The problem we have now is that the federal government, like everything is at the top, and the federal government is so removed from everyone's lives, and I don't like the EPA, and I don't like the federal bureaucracies because it's impossible. You as a regular person, because the people who work for the EPA aren't voted on by the people, they don't give a fuck if you like them or not. It's the same thing with the post office, the DMV. Those people don't care if you like them because their job is secure whether or not you like them or not. Like it's unlikely that you're going to drum up enough support to get their department defunded enough for them to get fired or anything. So I don't know if the EPA is the best way to do it necessarily. I don't like the idea of the federal bureaucracy, the federal government bureaucracy being like the buck stops with them. Like I think it should be with the states, and it should be with like elected representatives and things like that. Like we keep saying, it should be at a level where people can go to someone and seek a solution basically, rather than pray for the EPA gods to fix it for them.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also hit about an hour and 10 minutes. If y'all want to keep going, we can keep going. Otherwise,
How about this? Because this is a good topic, but I don't want to go too long. How
say this
about we
for Wednesday
we
too.
figure out what the topic is, but we basically continue this discussion because I think this discussion's been really good,
So
been really productive.
we'll continue Wednesday
I've
then.
enjoyed it, yeah.
Continue Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, talking about like government bureaucracies and stuff like that.
All right, write that into
We
the
can get into drinking water treatment.
Yeah.
write that into the topics channel. We can continue this Wednesday as well.
I don't have a keyboard in front of me, so.
Oh, I'll write.
Blah, blah.
I'll do it in after I finish up then.
Okay.
Okay. So
Alrighty.
cool. That was a good discussion. McGuire or Delta, one of y'all want to do your media report?
Okay, so I watched the whole Fallout TV show,
Yes.
and I'll give it like if 5 is average, I'll give it like a 4.2
Really?
out of 10.
I've heard good
5
things
being
about
average.
it. I haven't watched it, but I've heard good things about it.
Okay, there's on my Schizo website, I'll write a musing about this tonight or tomorrow.
Okay.
It's not bad. Again, 5 is average. So
Uh-huh.
5 is average. So 5 isn't bad, and 4.2 isn't. It's just a little bit below average. It's not that bad. But because I watched the Fallout TV show, I've been playing Fallout 1 on my Steam Deck again, and you
Nice.
should all go play
I have every Fallout
1.
game.
It is a fucking amazing game.
You should play New Vegas if you can get it to work.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fallout is
with the big titty mod.
With the jiggle physics are unreal.
I was mad that they didn't give the main character the big titty mod as a reference because one thing I will spoil, they did a fuck ton of references. They didn't do that reference, so it's not a real Fallout TV show.
True. Also, they kind of showed which ending was canon, didn't they? With Fallout 4.
I don't know. I never finished Fallout 4 because Fallout 4 was garbage.
Oh, the gameplay is the best out of all the games. The story is kind of shit.
Wrong,
the
false.
The story is shit, but the amount of customability you have in terms of how you build your character is pretty good. One of the better ones. But the story
I'm just
is
gonna
shit.
tell you right now. So one reason why I hate Fallout 4 is I hate like crafting games or games that like crafting is a major function around it, which is funny because I love Minecraft, but like that's the exception to the rule. I fucking hated Fallout 4 because there was so much crafting that you had to do, and I just don't give a fuck about crafting. I don't care about resource gathering.
Yeah, that's where I'm different. I actually like the crafting and I like building settlements and stuff. But I think when it came to character customability, I think Fallout 4 was one of the better ones.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah.
But the story is shit. But the story is garbage. The story is terrible though. I hate the story.
Oh, it sucks. Yeah.
I never finished it, but I'm assuming it's basically like you pick which faction and
there's
then
like four.
you go and
there's 4 factions. Yeah, there's 4 factions. You can probably guess which one they
are.
are.
Something to do with the Institute, and you gotta
So there's the Institute,
like the Institute, the Railroad,
the Institute, Railroad, Brotherhood, and the Minutemen. So 3 of them basically destroy the Institute, and then the Institute kill. But like basically, no matter what ending you choose, all the other factions get destroyed in some way.
Yeah, that is I'm glad I didn't finish it because that is just garbage.
Yeah.
Anyways, play Fallout 1. It is a fucking amazing game.
All right, for me, Dark Souls 2. I love that game to death. It is my favorite Dark Souls, like FromSoft game, next to Elden Ring. Love that shit. Everyone should play it and then learn the story for Dark Souls 2. It is phenomenal.
That sounds great.
Yeah. You, McGuire, what you got?
Okay. I suppose been a long weekend for radio, so we'll keep with it. We'll go with the ARRL Antenna Book 23rd edition. Fantastic reading. Just outstanding. Learn all about antennas.
Horizontal dipole. That's my jam.
Dipoles are great. They're fantastic. I love dipoles.
That's what like 99% of antennas you see are basically.
Mm-hmm. Gotta run that inverted deep V. That's where it's at.
The inverted V is good too.
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
Occasionally spice it up with a monopole.
All right. Is that everything? Is that everything y'all want to say? Any last thoughts? No, nothing?
Well, I do just want to throw this out here. Delta's really cute, and if there's any single women in the chat or men, he doesn't discriminate. I have his phone number. You can go ahead and hit him up.
Why are you saying this?
Yeah, Jew.
I'm trying to help.
He doesn't care if you're a Jew, a Nazi, black, white. He doesn't care. Call him. I'll give you his number. And I'll give you.
Delta's only rule is free use.
Yeah,
of him.
Just don't say his name, right, Chris?
I fucking hate everyone.
He also gives out his personal address all the time. Just ask him for it. He'll give it to you.
I fucking hate everyone.
All right.